Welcome back to our channel, where a nurse who had been kidnapped as a child finally gets her justice when she recognizes her kidnapper after 24 years. Our next real-life story is the nurse who recognized her kidnapped brother in her patient. Leanne was born and raised in Miami, Florida, USA when she was just 13 years old. She had always been curious about where her biological parents came from, so she began searching for them. She found out that her mother's maiden name was Garcia. She discovered that her mother had grown up in the small town of Hialeah. So Leanne decided to visit Hialeah to see if she could find any relatives. When she arrived, she saw an older Hispanic woman standing outside a house. "Hi, my name is Leanne," she said to the woman. "I think we might be related." The woman looked at Leanne for a moment before saying, "I think you might be right. Come inside. Let me make some horchata." Horchata is a tasty rice-based drink, often made in Hispanic households. So Leanne felt right at home. As they drank the horchata, the woman told Leanne that she was her biological grandmother. And they talked for hours about their family history. At one point, the grandmother went to get something from another room and accidentally left the front door unlocked. Without thinking much of it, Leanne went out into the backyard to look at the flowers. But when she turned around, she noticed that she was being followed by a stranger. She quickly ran back into the house and told her grandmother, "We have to go now. I can feel that guy staring at me." Her grandmother didn't seem concerned, though. "Probably just wanted to ask you for your number," she said. But Leanne knew that something was wrong. She ran to the front door. She heard her grandmother yell, "Don't go anywhere." It was too late, though. The man had already stepped inside and he was blocking the doorway. "Who are you?" Leanne asked him. The man smiled and replied, "Your brother." Before Leanne could react, her so-called brother grabbed her arm and pulled her outside. He forced her into his car and sped away. "Help me," she screamed as she looked back at the house. But no one came to help her. Meanwhile, the grandmother watched from the window as the car sped away. Tears streamed down her face as she called the police and told them everything. She explained that the man who had taken Leanne was her son, Pedro. She hadn't seen him in more than 20 years. But how could she stop him from hurting her granddaughter? Sadly, the police were unable to find Leanne or her kidnapper, so her grandmother could only wait and hope for the best. Meanwhile, Pedro took Leanne to an abandoned cabin in the middle of the woods. He kept her there for several days without food or water, and then he finally let her go. Leanne wandered onto a busy street, and people stared at her because she was covered in dirt and her clothes were torn. A kind woman offered her a bottle of water, and Leanne gratefully drank it. Then she noticed a group of teenagers walking nearby. She didn't want to be alone, so she joined them. They walked together for a while until one of the teenagers asked, "Where are you coming from, girl?" Leanne lied and said she had run away from home. "I'm sorry," she added, "but I need your help. Can you take me to a hospital?" They agreed, and soon she was being treated by doctors and nurses. At first, Leanne told the medical staff that her name was Maria Garcia. But after some time, she revealed her real name and told them what had happened to her. They immediately contacted the police, who began searching for Pedro. Unfortunately, he had already fled the state and they weren't able to find him. In the end, Leanne was placed in the care of her grandmother. She couldn't believe how lucky she was to be alive, but she also knew that she would never forget what had happened to her. She tried to move on with her life, but she would always be haunted by the memory of her kidnapper. Fast forward to the present day, Leanne is now a successful nurse working in a busy hospital. One day she was working in the emergency room when she saw a young man being brought in by two policemen. He had a gash on his arm and blood was streaming down his fingers. "What happened to you?" Leanne asked him. The man lied and said he had been mugged. Leanne noticed that his story didn't add up. She also noticed that he had a strange mole on his arm. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but it seemed familiar to her for some reason. After treating the man's wound, Leanne went to check on him. But as she walked into his room, she gasped in surprise. The man was sitting in bed, and he was the same man who had kidnapped her when she was a teenager. "Pedro!" Leanne exclaimed. "You're my kidnapper." Pedro panicked and tried to deny it, but Leanne wasn't fooled. She knew that she had finally gotten her revenge. She immediately called the police and told them what had happened. Pedro tried to escape, but he was caught and arrested. When the police searched his cell, they found a photo of Pedro and his wife. They also found a photo of Pedro and his wife with a young girl. And Leanne's blood ran cold when she realized that the girl was her. It turned out that Pedro had taken Leanne from her grandmother's house because he thought she was his daughter. He had always been jealous of Leanne, and he believed that his wife had only loved him because of her. He had kidnapped her in a moment of anger, but he soon regretted it. He had kept Leanne at the cabin for several days, but he had never intended to hurt her. In fact, he had let her go after she had cried for her grandmother. When the police interviewed Pedro's wife, she told them that she had no idea that he had kidnapped Leanne. She said that she had only met him after he had already kidnapped Leanne. He had told her that she was his sister. "Why would you lie to me?" she asked Pedro. "Why did you kidnap Leanne?" Pedro didn't know how to answer her. He had only done it because he was angry and jealous. But those excuses didn't make sense to anyone. Finally, Pedro was charged with kidnapping. At his trial, he apologized to Leanne and her grandmother, but he insisted that he had never meant to hurt her. In the end, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. As Pedro was led away in handcuffs, Leanne looked at him and said, "I finally have my life back now." After the trial, Leanne and her grandmother became even closer than ever before. Leanne realized that she was lucky to have such a strong and supportive grandmother, and she knew that she would never forget what had happened to her. But she also knew that she had finally gotten her revenge. When the nurse recognized her kidnapper and her patient, that's all for today.